Jhingzi and her husband enjoyed going to the zoo on weekends, not only because they loved getting up close and personal with exotic animals, but also because their son would get so excited during each visit. The little family was from Xi'an, the capital of the Jhingzi province in central China. In a BBC interview, she reminisced about the short time she got to spend with her son. He was about 1.5 years old at the time. We took him to Xi'an City Zoo. He spotted a worm on the ground. Curious as he was, he pointed at the worm and said to me, "Mama, look, a worm." And later on, when I carried him out of the zoo in my arms, he had the worm in his hand and stuck it in my face. Mao was Jhingzi's one and only child. The possibility of having another one didn't exist, because China implemented the infamous and highly criticized one-child policy in the 80s. The mother only wanted the best for her child, and she wanted the boy to be the best version of himself, which is why she gave him the nickname Ye, which means awesome. Because both parents were working, they took him to kindergarten first thing in the morning and picked him back up at night after work. Jhingzi worked for a company that exported crops, which meant that she sometimes had to leave the city for days at a time in order to be able to visit vendors in remote little villages all over China. During that time, Ye's father looked after him. This was a common occurrence, but one day, when Jhingzi was away on one of these trips again, she received a call and was told to come home immediately. She immediately packed her belongings and went back to Xi'an. There she was welcomed by her boss, who broke the tragic news to her in just one sentence: "Your son is missing." Only one sentence that triggered an entire bandwidth of negative emotions in Jhingzi. In the beginning, she still had hope and thought that it was impossible for him to just be gone. She believed that she was going to get him back. Jhingzi made the following comment: "I thought maybe my son got lost and a good Samaritan is going to bring him back to me." But just like the video's title indicates, her hopes were crushed. Ye was 2 years and 8 months old when he vanished. Jhingzi's husband explained to her and the police how the events had unfolded. Just as any other day, he dropped him off at kindergarten in the morning and picked him back up in the evening. On the way back home, he visited some family members who owned a hotel. According to his statement, he left Ye alone for only 2 or 3 minutes while he went inside to say hello and grab a water from the hotel bar. When he came back out again, his son was gone. Jhingzi went through the entire neighborhood and showed everyone a picture of her son to figure out if anyone had seen him. She also printed more than 100,000 flyers and distributed them in trains, buses and on the street. Furthermore, she also contacted the local newspapers. But all of these efforts did not bring her son back. Nobody had seen him. It was as if he had been fallen off the face of the earth. Despite of the grief that overwhelmed her time and time again, she was able to let the desperation fuel her. She did her own research and dove into criminal underground, where she encountered a problem caused by China's one-child policy, namely increased child abductions. Couples in large cities were only allowed to have one child. People out in the countryside were allowed two if the first one was a girl. Certain social structures, such as passing on the family name and the corresponding survival of the family tree, is something that the male population in China is born into. And if a family didn't have the money to pay the fines associated with having a second child, then they had no choice but to be satisfied with one child only, regardless of the sex of the baby. On top of that, bringing a second child into this world is no guarantee for it being a boy. In the beginning, before getting so involved in the search, she blamed her husband. However, she quickly realized that they had to work together if they wanted to have a chance of seeing their child again. And for 4 years, this strategy worked out fairly well. But then came the point when the daily fights and the trauma that had been experienced got too overwhelming, and the two ended up going separate ways. But Jhingzi never gave up. Every Friday after work, she took the train into different surrounding provinces to look for her son, and on Sundays, late at night, she would return back home. During the same year that her son had vanished, she traveled to a city with the name of Jhingzi, which was not exactly located close by. She had received a message from a married couple that said that they had just adopted a boy from Xi'an and that he looked a lot like her son. But after waiting in front of the couple's house for several hours, she found out that they had taken the boy to Xi'an. Immediately, she got on the way to go back home and rushed to the hotel that the two supposedly had reservations for. There she learned that they had already left to go to a different village, so she traveled to said village in order to look for them there. When she finally found it, the hotel manager told her that they just checked out a few hours ago. All of this was so unreal, much like it had come straight out of a movie script. But she didn't give up and went to the village that the man's parents were from. There she found out that the family was probably on the way to the woman's parents' house. But her body demanded rest, since by that time she had been awake for more than 48 hours without having eaten. So she had no choice but to listen to her body and take a break, only to drive out the next village a few hours later. There she found out that the boy was not her son Ye. I had been so sure that the boy was Ye. I was so disappointed, it had a huge effect on me. After this experience, I often heard my son's voice. My mother was scared that I would suffer a mental breakdown. And who could have been mad at her for that? Her son was the first thing she thought about when she got out of bed in the morning, and the last thing on her mind when she closed her eyes at night. A friend, who was a medical doctor, told her to go and seek treatment before the loss of her son and the search would break her. At the hospital, the doctor told her that he would be able to cure her physical ailments, but not the pain in her heart. Jhingzi thought about this statement for a long time. She envisioned her son coming home one day and finding a crazy mother at the house that was no longer capable of comprehending that her long-lost son had just returned. And on top of that, this condition would also prevent her from continuing to look for him. She changed the entire outlook on the events and made sure to distance herself emotionally from them in order to avoid being so negatively impacted by further setbacks. Jhingzi focused her mind and her soul on the search for her son. It was only after the visit in the hospital that she found out about something that we mentioned previously: child abductions. She did some research and located families that shared the same experience as her. Soon a network of affected families was created. They sent each other photos and flyers with information about their missing children in an effort to get their stories out of the neighboring provinces. The network helped locate many children, but not Ye. After 19 years of searching, she began volunteering for a website named Baby Come Home. This was a service for reuniting families. In an interview she said that this was the first time since her son's disappearance she didn't feel as alone, because she was surrounded by so many other mothers who were going through the same ordeal. They were able to relate to her sorrow and the rage and the never-ending desire to drive the search for her son forward, whatever it may cost. In 2009, the Chinese government established a DNA database where parents who believed that their child was abducted could register. This database helped reunite many parents with their children, but unfortunately, it did not work out for Jhingzi. However, the fact that almost all of the missing children were boys too made her believe that she was in fact dealing with a kidnapping case. Time went by, and she spent many more endless days looking for her son, but she experienced nothing but disappointment. In 2015, her mother passed away at 94. On her deathbed, she stated that she had dreamed of Ye and she said, "It's been 30 years, it's about time for him to come home." And Jhingzi made a promise to her mother. She was going to find him, no matter what. This promise energized her and gave her new hope. Her mother passed away on January 15th, the day her son was born. She viewed this as a sign from God. On May 10th of the same year, on Mother's Day to be exact, one of Xi'an's city officials called, stating that her son Mao Yin had been located. In the beginning, Jhingzi did not want to believe the officer's words. She was too scared to be disappointed again. But soon it became clear that he was found, based on an age progression picture that someone had made for her. It showed an image of what Ye would likely look like as an adult. A man in Chengdu City, a place about 700 kilometers away, was identified based on facial recognition software, so authorities asked him to do a DNA test. He followed their request and the result came back on May 10th. He turned out to be Ye after all, Jhingzi's missing son, who she had been searching for the last 32 years. On May 18th, the two were reunited, but right before their meeting, Jhingzi couldn't help but worry. She was scared that her son, who was an adult by then, who had a family and a job, wouldn't recognize her or accept her as his mother. In an interview, she made the following statement: "Prior to the meeting, I was really worried. I was nervous that he may not accept me or that in his heart he forgot about me. I was really scared to hug him because I wasn't sure that he would hug me back. I think that would have hurt me the most if my son, that I have been looking for the past 32 years, would reject my love and my affection." But soon she realized that there was no reason to worry. When Jhingzi and Mao Yin finally met at the airport, Mao yelled "Mother" and ran up to her and threw himself into her arms. It turned out that 1 year after his abduction, Mao was purchased by a family in the province Xi'an for 700 euros. He lived and still lives in Chengdu City, and ironically, he followed Jhingzi's desperate search on TV. He had always hoped that this poor woman would one day find her missing son again, because he always thought that she seemed like such a good person. Mao had even thought to himself that the pictures of her son looked similar to his pictures as a child, but he never quite finished this thought. Why should he? Nobody just figures that their life would one day serve as a basis for a Hollywood script. Mao Yin and Jhingzi talk on the phone almost on a daily basis, but nevertheless he continues to live in Chengdu and Jhingzi still lives in Xi'an. She would love to have him closer, but she also knows that he is a grown man with a family of his own. "This is what I always wanted for him," she once said in an interview. How the kidnapping came about and who was behind it remains a mystery until today. According to the Chinese government, they are working on solving these cases, and not just Mao Yin's, but countless other missing children cases all over China. And Jhingzi continues to volunteer her time to support them in this cause. And this brings us to the end of today's video. For once we have a case that has a happy ending and lets us go to bed feeling hopeful. If you liked the video, then give me a like, leave a comment or subscribe to my channel. Thank you in advance and thank you for watching. Have a good night and see you next time.